I've been a fan of redneck blinds ever since I got my first one back in 2012. And at first it was the comfort that got me, especially during the late season, because it was so much warmer, you kept the wind off. I could hunt, I felt like, more days during the late season than I could when it was just, hanging from a tree and freezing. But then it was the family aspect of it, being able to bring the kids out with me. They were kind of young, and they're fidgety, and it was comfortable for them. And then even as they got older, they enjoyed the hunt a lot more out of the blind than they did out of a tree, because we could talk and make it more social. So that was the start of it. But then the more I hunted out of these blinds, I realized that there are other situations where they really made me more effective as a bow hunter. You could say, well, it's more fun to hunt out of a tree stand. You can see everything, you got the wind in your face, it's got that full fall feeling to it. You got smelling the leaves, all that stuff that goes with the experience. But there are situations where, aside, blinds just are more effective. You're going to kill more deer if you hunt out of blinds in two situations than you would if you only stuck with tree stands. So I'm going to talk about those two situations in this week's episode. Number one is anytime you're hunting around a food source. There's so many deer that come to these places generally. Let's just say relative to your normal spots, there's more deer that come to the feeding areas in the evenings than what you encounter pretty much anywhere else that you hunt. Let's say you're hunting a bottleneck during the rut and the bucks move through there. You kind of know where they're going to go. There's trail systems, there's funnels, but you get to a feeding area and now you're pulling deer from almost every direction, and they all end up, kind of milling around, lots of eyes, ears, noses. It's super hard to beat all of those deer for more than, even just a portion of one hunt, let alone multiple hunts if you're up in a tree stand. So the blind really comes into its own there. They can't see you as well. If you do your job correctly inside the blind, keep some of the windows blackened out so they can't see your silhouette moving. They can't hear you, if you're not crunching around in there, which the blind has a way of kind of holding, sounds in, also. But then they also can't smell you as well if you keep all the windows closed, if you got the right kind of blind. Like I said, these rednecks have really gotten where I can keep the windows closed and the deer downwind of me don't smell me. And even toward the end of the Midwest whitetail days, we'd have two people in these blinds, myself and the cameraman, and the deer would be, 15, 20 yards away, straight downwind of us, and not pick us up. Not a single deer in there would know that we were in the blind. And that led to some successes, killing some of the deer that, that we're actually trying to kill out of those blinds in those situations by keeping the windows closed. So for sure, that made me more effective, especially hunting around any kind of food source. And I took it one step further. I put my blinds on trailers so that I could move them around. Because once the deer got used to the blind in that feeding area, whether it was, a combine cornfield that the farmer had just cleaned up, or maybe it's a little small food plot that you had, you could move it around and they wouldn't pay any attention to it. They didn't notice that it had moved, 30 yards or 40 yards. So you could tweak in on their actual, where they came to when they fed. You could kind of fine tune, to get in front of them. Okay, now that's situation one. Situation two is any place that the wind swirls. Any place that you can't hunt out of a tree stand without the deer, picking you off in some direction around you. There have been a lot of spots over the years for me where I've said, boy, if only I could put a tree stand down here and not get picked off, I could kill every deer on this property. Whether it's say a creek crossing or someplace where it just feels like during the rut, everything's going to go through there. I would try to hunt those spots, but experience taught me that all you're doing is educating deer and you're making your hunting area worse. So I gave up on hunting those places until I started hunting out of these blinds. Then all of a sudden that opened that door again, to these types of locations, places where the wind swirled, where it was too unpredictable to hunt out of a tree stand. I could put a blind in those spots, keep the windows closed, and again, the deer didn't know I was in there. I could hunt places that otherwise I couldn't. So those are the two situations. whereas a bow hunter, the blind makes you more effective. I will guarantee that it would, because I've just seen it too many times in my own personal hunting. It just makes sense. If they don't know you're there, you got a chance to kill them, and there's no better way to assure that than to be inside of a blind. There's certain places, obviously, where you're not going to put a blind, even down in a valley. You have to be able to see. You know, blinds aren't good if you're going to get surprised, because you can't be looking out all the windows all the time. So it has to be maybe a spot where the deer are crossing a ditch, like I said, or a creek, or something along those lines where you know pretty much they're going to be on one side or the other, so you can keep, you know, you can keep watching. You wouldn't want to sit up on a bedding ridge or just in places where deer move through, you know, in a little bit more of a random pattern, because you can't see enough. You don't have that field of view. So if I'm in the timber, I'm going to be in a tree stand. But if I'm in the open area, pretty good chance, unless I've got a really good wind advantage, like being up on top of a bluff and blowing my scent off, or something similar to that, if I'm going to be in a more open area, I'm probably going to be in a blind. And that's, you know, I just want to have success. And maybe someday I'll say, I really don't care if I kill stuff or not. All I want to do is sit in a tree. You know, maybe that day will come, but it's not here yet. I still like to have close encounters with these deer that I'm hunting. So keep those two situations in mind, and I think it'll really make you, like I said, a more effective bow hunter. I keep threatening that at some point I'm going to hang my cameras and show you what deer that I'm seeing, but it's still a little bit early for that. I'm kind of jumping the gun. Like I said a couple weeks ago, I really started around the middle of September and then, you know, wrap up sometime around the middle of October. So I'm still a little bit ahead of that curve, but there's more topics we can cover in the meantime. I appreciate you joining me. I hope you enjoyed these episodes. I've had a lot of fun doing them, and I'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Bowhunting Whitetails. And remember to always dream big.